Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Tom Barnas. This is the Front Stoop podcast, all about living in Chicago from the front stoop of my house. And it's funny, you meet more people sitting on the front stoop of your house than you could on a dating site. I mean, it's incredible how many people walk by one's house and you get to know what's going on in the neighborhood a little bit more, hang out, and really see the creeps in the neighborhood, if you will, the people who do weird things because you're out there all the time. I think it's to the point now where when my wife and I go outside, we annoy people because they're like, oh, they're out there on their stoop again. But it's just because we like to sit on our stoop, man. It's like a rite of passage in Chicago. I remember my parents talking about sitting on the stoop. I remember going to my grandma's house, who lived in Little Village at like 27th and like right off of California. And we used to sit on her steps. And she had one of those houses where you walk up to the house and you can either go downstairs to the first level of it's like a three flat, right? So you go down to the first level, that's like the garden, and then you can just go up to the main house. And the steps, I remember as a kid, were huge. They're wooden steps. This is an old house in Little Village. And you would sit on those steps. And I remember this is probably in the 80s, right? So I would say like 88, 87, 86 is when we were there a lot. And you would hang out on the stoop. And I remember it was even in that neighborhood, and that neighborhood was changing at the time. And it got a little sketchy for a while. And now Little Village is awesome because it's been kind of turned around despite what you hear in the news. A lot of that's garbage, right? Little Village is great. That's where my mom is from. And we would sit on the stoop. And when my mom's family there in the 80s, it was changing from like a Polish neighborhood to a Mexican neighborhood. But there was a lot of old Polish people in the neighborhood, or just people in the neighborhood, because Chicago is just filled with neighborhoods. Even though it might be like Chinatown, it's not all just Chinese people, or Ukrainian village, not all Ukrainians. There's all sorts of people living in all parts of the neighborhoods. And Little Village was very much a melting pot back then. And I remember sitting on the stoop and people walking by. And then you have the guy with the ice cream cart ringing the bells. He would walk by my mom and dad's house, or my mom's house, rather. And it was just this magical place because you would go on the stoop because it really didn't have air conditioning. So it was summertime, it'd be hot outside. So by the time the sun started to set and the daybreak would happen to fall into dusk, you would sit out there to cool off, right? So you're out there with a drink. And I remember my grandma being out there, my aunts being out there, me and my brothers playing, running up and down the street, just having a ball. And that memory, along with another memory of my Aunt Judy's house in the Garfield Ridge neighborhood, just like cemented my version of Chicago that I choose to believe to this day. It was being outside, street lights coming on, and your neighbors coming out because everybody was so hot. They would come outside, especially back in the 80s when not everybody had air conditioning, come outside to cool off with a cool drink. And it would just turn into like this emporium of people having a good time and enjoying themselves, and it was just lovely. It was just great. You hear different languages on the street. You heard Polish, you heard Spanish, you heard German, but the one thing you heard that was universal was laughter, and it was just so great. I just remember smelling all the foods. I mean, think about it. If you drive through Chicago now in the summertime, especially at dinner time, you can smell so many different foods. It's incredible. And more intense in certain neighborhoods based on the majority of the people that make up that neighborhood. In my mom's neighborhood growing up, it was Polish and Mexican, which is like the Chicago mix. And that's what I am. I'm Polish and Mexican. So you have this mix of people, the mix of food, laughing all together, enjoying themselves. And that made me fall in love with the city. I remember vividly as a kid running up and down the street and the lights flickering in the leaves. Oh gosh, it was just so much fun, right? And that's why I wanted to start this podcast, because so many things happen from the front stoop. And that's where things happen there. And our block is very much the same thing now. When we first moved to this block, it was during the pandemic, and a lot of people didn't come outside. People were scared of each other. People were wearing masks outside. So, it was a little strange time, right? In this neighborhood that I live in, which is called South Edgebrook by most of the old timers in the neighborhood. Some people argue Norwood Park. Some people argue Gladstone Park. Eh. Um, but either way, all of this happens in that little spot that's kind of behind Superdog. That's the neighborhood I live in, and it was a very old Polish neighborhood, and you would see like three people walk by with dogs, and that was kind of it. Now there's 300 people that are walking with dogs. There's children. There's all this and that and everything else. So a lot of things happened in a short amount of time in this neighborhood. But one of the main things that happened that I am so thankful for is our neighbor down the street, Debbie and Chris were like, we're probably more Debbie, let's be honest, Chris. But either way, Chris followed along and thank you for that. But either way, Debbie's like, we should do a block party. So one day, we're on the stoop and we see a little flyer in the door and we look at it and it's like, oh, there's going to be a block party this year, except it's going to be a little different. It's going to be a fall block party. So it was like an Oktoberfest block party, which is so fun, right? Because we were excited. Nobody knew anybody really on the street. So this is a way to get together. And now we're on our third or fourth block party and we just had it. And it was something special. It was October, designed to be a fall vibe of a block party, Oktoberfest vibe. Turned out not so much a fall October vibe because it was 90 degrees in October at this block party, but it was wonderful. And it just made me realize why I love living in Chicago so much. People ask me that all the time. Why do you live in Chicago? It's this and this and this. And so many of those people have the wrong impression of our city. And it's exhausting to try to defend it, because if you don't even bother to come here and be a part of it and look at it, then how the hell am I going to make it make sense to you? Because just like when some people look at a math problem, it just makes sense to them, they can figure it out, and art makes sense to people or it doesn't. Chicago's the same way. Either it makes sense to you or it doesn't. Yes, it's a city that has crime. Yes, it has traffic, although the Kennedy's open, so that's nice. But we do have a train system. We have beautiful lakefront. We have a second to none skyline in the world. And the people here that make up the city aren't enemies. These people here are your friends, your neighbors, your delivery driver, your mailman, like that's what Chicago is, right? It's just, and it's all these different languages muddled together to give you the Chicago accent. That's what the city is. And that's what was on display at our block party. Our block is unique because we have a lot of firemen, police, because a lot of city workers live in this neighborhood, mixed with lawyers, media people, undercover agents. Like, it's all sorts of crazy stuff that people live on our block, but like entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs, architects and things like that. And we all got together and we had a great time on our block on Austin Avenue. One of our neighbors hires a band every year. Every year he hires a band that's like a legit great band, and they play our block party. And they put them at the north end of the block, right underneath the street lamps. So there's like light illuminating at night, because they only play at night. Everybody comes out with their fire pits, although not as many this year because it was 98 degrees in the middle of the night. But either way, you come out with your fire pits, and we had a chili cook-off. And there was face painting, there was a DJ, there was bounce houses, there was a huge tournament of bags, there was a little balloon fight, there was a water slide. I mean, all this is happening on a block and it's not even like a typical Chicago block, it's a little bit shorter of a block. But either way, it was just magical and special, and I'm really grateful that I was able to help out with that block party. Everybody kind of did their part. But it was just a lot of fun. The wife brought bagels, or I'm sorry, not bagels. It was cinnamon rolls to the block party, and they were a hit, and that kind of set the tone for the day. And it was just fun. It was just a good time. And I think it's a unique thing to Chicago, not block parties, but the way we do block parties. Although I feel like block parties were kind of honed in, the craft was made for the world to see in Chicago. I mean, because that's why we have our street festivals are such a big deal, because they're basically a play on block parties. If you think about it, somebody threw a block party one year and they're like, oh, we should do this and just close down, or a festival. Everybody wants to come to our block. That's kind of what a lot of the street festivals are in the city. Everybody thinks that their neighborhood's so great that they kind of want to show it off to the rest of the city. And that's what happens. I don't think we'll do that in our neighborhood here, because there's already a festival that's like the Throwback Festival that's over on Milwaukee Avenue. But either way, it's just a fun thing to check out. So I just wanted to talk about my block for a minute, because the Front Stoop podcast and my block have very much similar things in conjunction, and a very cool thing. And it was also the day the Cubs started the playoffs with the Milwaukee Brewers. And that first game, I mean, the whole thing turned out not to be all that great if you're a Cubs fan, but They did make a series of it, and the last time I did this was talking about the beginning of the playoffs. So it was it was just a nice way to button that all up. The Cubs got their butts kicked, but the next day we enjoyed the Bears win. So it's a win-win situation. The Cubs made the playoffs. The block party was incredible, and it's just fun. It's just a fun time living in Chicago in the summertime and the wintertime. But summertime with all the block parties are great. You get to try all your neighbors cooking their food, and you get to see them. And then when winter happens and everybody's just miserable because it's snowing and everybody else, you're not weirded out by the random neighbor who's usually Chris with his snowblower snowblowing the entire block. Because that's my block, you know what I mean? Somebody's snowblowing half of it, the other one's snowblowing the other half. Somebody's helping digging their cars out. People are looking out for each other. And there's always the one neighbor that's pissed off that you're on their grass. That's just kind of how it goes, right? So anyhow, thank you for listening. This is a short podcast. I'll have more coming up here from the Front Stoop, observations of things I see and people I meet and whatnot. I think the next one I'll talk about is my trip to France with my daughter, Lucy. That was something, and we'll get to that. But this one's good for now. I'll see you. Try to do this on a weekly basis. I'll get back up and running here in a second. It's tough when you have a 10-month-old kid. But either way, thank you for watching. We'll see you later.